We'll try that again. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Cade Museum for this March 2nd meeting of the Rotary Club of Gainesville. I'm Tom Collette, your Sergeant at Arms for this Rotary Club year. Before we begin, let's do this. Those of you watching after the fact on YouTube, please register your registration for watching this meeting at info@rotarygainesville.org. That's info@rotarygainesville.org. Now we begin our meeting, as we always do, with a song and the Pledge of Allegiance. And to sing today, with his accompaniment by Gordon, we have Pete Enwall.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We put me over here today so I don't have to do the Joe Biden sprint to the podium. So anyway, rather than a joke, I thought I'd just share some words of wisdom with everybody, and that is, never share a secret with a clock. Time will tell. We're going to sing God Bless America today. I'm sorry, we're going to sing My Country 'Tis of Thee. That one, yep. There we go. My country 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride, from every mountainside, let freedom ring. Join me in pledging allegiance to our flag, which is over on the wall or the window. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much, Pete and Gordon. Please remain standing now for our invocation delivered today via Zoom by Ian Fletcher. Ian, it's yours.
If you guys can hear me, I can go ahead and do the prayer. Someone could let me know. Can you hear me? If you hear me online, okay. Let us pray. To the only wise one who is able to uplift, redeem, and restore, the one who will go before us to level mountains and break down gates, the one who will give joy and restore all. We approach a year of the COVID pandemic filled with anxiety, fear, loss, and recovery. Remember our sick, those with COVID and those with other illness. Please help us maintain our work towards the ideal of service, the opportunity for service, ethical standards, understanding, goodwill, and peace. Keep our focus on the work in our club and our community. Amen.
Thank you very much, Ian. And that was on me. I apologize for that. We had someone speaking before the meeting and was speaking quite loudly, so I turned the volume down. Sorry about that, Ian. If we have, well, we're going to do this first. Pete will stay on the microphone there. And if you're here in attendance and you have your birthday in the month of March, bring your money over to Matthew Brady, our president. He'll take it right away for his reelection fund, okay? So here are our birthdays in the month of March, everyone. We have Colleen Keene, Anthony Salzman, John Shirt, Gabe Nosa, John Kirkpatrick, Ryan Thompson, TJ Pichet, Victoria Watson, Darrell Baird, Zakiah Smith-Dore, Kirk Klein, Charlie Page, Eric O'Day's already brought his money up, Eric O'Day, John Mason, Barbara Anderson, Dusty Walters, Susan Crowley, John Jopling, Pam Carpenter, Frank Sayer, John Bruner, and Monica Brazington. We'll wait for Susan to make her deposit. You can just put it right there on the computer. I'll give it to Matthew. That's right. For those of you watching after the fact, we're coming after you. And now we'll all sing happy birthday again, Gordon and Pete.
Let me do it a cappella. We're gonna sing it a cappella. Ready? Oh, never mind. Here we go. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, fellow Rotarians. Happy birthday to you.
Thank you. Next, we have some folks, guests of our club. For our club member, please identify yourself and then please introduce your guests.
Good afternoon, Greg Young. I'm fortunate to have two guests today, mother and daughter. Mother visiting daughter from India, and I will let them introduce themselves.
Hello, my Rotary greetings to all of you and happy birthday, whose birthday falls today. I'm happy to meet you. After 2 months, I'm attending the meeting over here. I have been inducted as Rotarian in 1988, the year in which Rotary introduced women in their organization. I had been a president of my club, the second largest club in District 3060 with 135 members. In 2007 and 8, I was also assistant governor, helping my governor. And my club is known for its social projects. I'm happy to know all about your activities. And I wish someday we will work together as we have been doing all over the world. I'm visiting your town because my daughter is studying her PhD, second PhD, and this is her 4th year in Gainesville. I'm happy to meet all of you. At present, I'm editing my club bulletin, which we published every fortnight, and now it is online only. We had our meeting stopped due to COVID-19, but from 15th April, we have again started meeting physically. Thank you very much. And again, my Rotary greetings to all of you on behalf of my club president and the members of my board. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, Rotarians. I'm Kent Walker, and I'm really pleased to introduce my guests, Mr. John Weasty, retired Dean of the College of Agriculture at the University of Florida. And I'm really happy to have John. Been very involved in civic groups in the area for a long time. So.
Welcome to each and every one of you. We now have some announcements for you today. Well, we have one more.
Yeah, you're going to get an announcement again from Iowa. Now, things are getting a little better in Iowa. They got up to 40 degrees yesterday. I don't know how Texas is doing, but that is really something, isn't it? This is a year of weather. We can say that. But greetings. Connie and I are in town, by the way, for 3 months. Try to be every year for our daughter and grandkids and all that. And sometimes shopping gets in the way. Would you believe that? But anyway, nice to be here. Thank you.
again, welcome to everyone visiting with us today. We have a set of announcements for you today by 4 of our fellow members. We begin, please welcome up here to the podium to make his announcement in person, Greg Young. Come on up, Greg.
Thank you. Thank you. I just found out what I'm supposed to be announcing. So, yeah, thanks, TJ, out there in virtual land. Well, this past Saturday, quite a number of our Rotarians gathered at the Blunt Center, the new Santa Fe building that's being built on 6th and University. And the supervisor of that project gave us all a tour, and Dalton and Mike Conroy being the construction guys, they ate it up, but it was great. All of us really enjoyed it. We probably had about 30, 50, 25, 30 people attend, and it was great. And the supervisor was great. He took us to every floor in the building. We made the rounds, and it's a structural engineering marvel. If you get a chance to look at it closer sometime, take a peek at it. But anyway, you'll keep your eyes open for more fun and fellowships. TJ's doing a great job.
Great job, Greg. Next, we have via Zoom, the aforementioned, he's here every week in this spot, TJ Pichet. TJ, take it away.
Hi, everybody. This weekend, we're going to be doing another vaccine information walk on Saturday at 2 p.m. If you live closer to Newberry, we're going to be doing one with Newberry's Mayor, Jordan Marlowe. But otherwise, we're going to continue to go into East Gainesville and give out some information and get folks signed up for the vaccine if they're not already signed up. I know that Dr. Hart is going to follow me at some point, and she has some really exciting news about our effort. But if you're interested, please look at your email, get signed up, come spend some time with us for a few hours, either in Newberry or in East Gainesville, and we'd be excited to see you. Thank you.
Thank you, TJ. We will follow TJ up, as he mentioned, with Nancy Hart via Zoom. Nancy, you're on.
Hi, everybody. I want to start by acknowledging John Jopling, one of our members who came and walked with us on the 21st. And I forgot to acknowledge him last week. I'm really sorry. It was not TJ's fault. It was all mine. And if you wonder whether it's worth doing this, I have to tell you that Rotary is stamping out polio throughout the world. We know how to do this, and we're really good at it. And what TJ and I discovered is that people we visited at their homes and helped them sign up are already getting their shots. I had one of the people I visited had her appointment within 3 days of my entering her into the Alachua County website. She went to the Martin Luther King Center. She said she was in and out in 15 minutes. It was slick as a whistle. So I just want to encourage you, if you haven't joined us on one of these walks, you're going to get a huge education about what neighborhoods are like. Maybe you don't live anywhere near these neighborhoods, but we all need to know what our neighbors' living conditions are like, and we can do a simple thing, help people get on that website and get their immunizations. If we can get 75% of everybody immunized, we'll stamp this thing to the ground. So join us.
Up next, we have one last announcement. Here in person for this announcement is Colleen Keene. You can applaud her. Woo!
Good afternoon, fellow Rotarians. I have another update to the Wild Game Feast. I previously announced that we're going to move that to the fall of 2021. But since a recent board meeting, we voted to keep our traditional schedule. We plan, COVID permitting, to have a seafood spectacular in the fall of 2021 and move the Wild Game Feast back to March of 2022. We plan to do a thank you for our sponsors of the Wild Game Feast 2020, because without the sponsors, we would not be able to do what we do for the community. So thank you for your patience and your understanding, and stay tuned for future updates.
Thank you very much, Colleen. Up next, he'll be hopping his way up to the stage, looking at our topic today. Please welcome your president, Matthew Brady.
Actually, Tom, I think we wrote down the wrong topic, but anyways, we'll work on a new quote here in the next few minutes. Welcome, everyone. Gordon, Pete, I kind of feel the same. I got here and jacket was not in my truck, no umbrella. But hey, you know, we're here, we're healthy, we've got a great group, we've got a live presenter. And, you know, my script is just getting very, very easy each week when you have announcements like TJ and Nancy and talking about what great things you all as Rotarians of this club are doing and making a difference. You know, it should make each of you smile. It sure makes me smile, and it's something special to be a part of. And I'm very thankful for that. And I want to say something about Colleen. If you, as feast master this year, we have not had a feast, but she's worked as hard as anyone ever in more meetings in trying to figure out and handle, you know, in the foundation board in general and all that's been involved in that process. So I just quickly, another round of applause for all of them. There was another visiting Rotarian via Zoom, no stranger to visiting with us live, Billy Atkins from the Lake City Club. So she's joining us Zoom as well. And I'll just make sure that I do not miss any others. But without further ado, today we do have a live speaker. Dr. Stephen Johnson is an associate professor of wildlife ecology at the University of Florida. His area of expertise is natural history and conservation of amphibians and reptiles. He is currently the president of the Wildlife Society's Invasive Species Working Group, and he's authored or co-authored more than 100 peer-reviewed scientific papers and popular articles. And not too many more details, but I'll say Steve is a native Floridian. He enjoys the outdoors. Jason, we can appreciate this. He's a beer snob. So without further ado, Dr. Steve Johnson.
I was telling Matthew, this is the first time since just about a year ago when UF went to, at a snap of a finger, everything online. This is the first time I've been in front of a live audience, this many people in such a confined space. So on the one hand, I'm extremely excited. On the other hand, I'm probably going to have an odd dream about this tonight. So, but anyway, so my initial topic when I agreed to do this was something about frogs, I think. But since then, I've decided I wanted to tell you guys about a lizard, a non-native lizard in Florida that needs to be on your radar and everybody else's, because this is sort of analogous to the Burmese python in the Everglades, which causes a lot of issues. So I'm going to be talking about this Argentine black and white Tegu lizard. And so at the University of Florida, I'm in the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences, so in Cows, go Gators. And my appointment is teaching primarily and outreach or extension. So this is sort of part of what I do in my extension role. But I also engaged in research through colleagues and through my graduate students. And I had a grad student work on a diet study and a movement study of Tegu lizards a few years ago, and I'll show you a little bit of her data. So this is what I'm going to try to get through in about 15 or 20 minutes. First of all, I'll tell you what, when I say something is invasive, I need to tell you what I mean. Brief overview of the situation with introduced, not necessarily invasive, but introduced reptiles in Florida. And then I'm going to go through a variety of topics about Argentine black and white tegus, which again, that's the focal species for today. So when I use the term an invasive species, I'm referring to a species that is not native to a particular area, so you have to have a geographic context in mind. It was intentionally or unintentionally moved to this new place outside of its native range by the actions of people. Might be indirectly that it hitched a ride on a cargo ship, or it might be, as in the case of this tegu, they were initially brought in the pet trade and subsequently accidentally or intentionally were released by people. And then importantly, one of three things: it does or can cause harm to the environment, to the economy, negative impacts on the economy, or it can have a negative effect on human quality of life. And the tegu, I can certainly make a good argument that it's causing negative impacts to the environment and the economy, human quality of life. You be the judge of that. And there are just some examples right there. Feral cats or outdoor cats. Keep your cats inside. They kill lots of native wildlife. That's just my little soapbox. But lots of other things. Again, I mentioned Burmese pythons. They're one of many, many. Those are just a small list of the many non-native and invasive. All right. If something's non-native or introduced, it just means it's not native here, not having any impacts, or maybe we don't know of any. But again, that's my definition. So the big picture for introduced reptiles in Florida, the sad thing to say is we are the global epicenter for introduced reptiles. More introduced reptiles are in Florida now, or have been introduced to Florida, many of which are here established and breeding, than any other place in the world. And there's a variety of reasons for this. One is a booming pet trade, and the pet trade is the invasion pathway of recent, how most of these species got here. It's how the tegu got here. But we have 4 species of introduced crocodilians, including a Nile crocodile that was actually seen in Florida one time. We have one breeding, black caiman. 30 species of turtles, roughly, with 5 of them breeding. 40 species of snakes, with 5 of those breeding, including the Burmese python that you've heard about. And then the big group, in terms of numbers of introductions, species introduced, and the numbers of species breeding, are lizards. You can see we got about 50 species of non-native lizards that are breeding in Florida now. And this is 3 times as many native lizards as we have in the state. So that's this is just a sad claim to fame that Florida has that we shouldn't be proud of. But there was some legislation passed just last week that I'll share with you. So we're making an effort, but the train has often left the station before we react. But better than doing nothing. All right, so to the tegu. Features of identifying tegus, and I want to point this out because I want you to be able to know if you see a tegu, because I'm going to state at the end, people need to report these things. This is how the state and federal, or really state agencies and some federal agencies, are really monitoring how far these animals are spreading. A lot of it is citizen scientists who are making reports, because there's only a handful of scientists out there, and there's more people out every day. So if you were to be walking around here in Depot Park and they're like, oh, that Johnson fella told me about this big black and white lizard. I see one of those. I would want you to report it. So it's a pretty big lizard, as you'll see in a minute. They can get 4 feet long. Spend most of their time on the ground. They don't climb very well, but they do swim well. They're pretty thick, heavy-bodied lizards. They have, as you can sort of see, strong legs and claws. They have a pretty long tail that's a little bit longer than their body. And a tapered snout that's sort of blunt on the end, and then dry skin with relatively small scales. It gives them somewhat from a distance a smoothish appearance. And that's important because we don't want people misidentifying small alligators as tegu lizards. And alligators are very rough, as I'll show you. But never underestimate the inability of someone to identify something. I'll tell you that from experience. So a little more detail. So body length. So the body length is the as we call snout to the vent, or basically where the back legs are to the tip of the nose, can be up to 20 inches. Now, clearly they start out smaller than this. Total length of 50 inches, so they can get about 4 feet long. They can weigh up to over 10 pounds, so they're pretty heavy, robust lizards. And then the key features are these black and white stripes, these bands that they have along their body. And they have a forked tongue, but you're not likely to see that. And again, this sort of smooth looking, but if you were to hold one, you'd see they're not exactly smooth. They're more rough. They're not exceptionally shiny or anything like that. Young ones look a good bit different than the adults. And until they're about a month old, they have this green color on their head, and they have large scales on their head. The rest of the body has pretty small scales. And these guys are about 10 to 12 inches total length when they hatch. And we don't have any native lizards that have a green head like that, just the head. And pretty much our biggest native lizard is roughly about 10 to 12 inches at its maximum size. It's a species of skink that we have that is going to decline on the UF campus in one little spot when they destroy McCarty Woods soon. Again, that was a little side there. You probably don't know what I'm talking about, but that's okay. So don't want people misidentifying things and reporting wrong species. So, tell people about lizards. So this tegu, which you can see in my hand there, is a member of this family of lizards called Tegas. All right. We have one native one in Florida, and that's a small lizard. It's only about 7-8 inches long. It's thin. It has little stripes. You would never misidentify it as a tegu. But we do have several tegus. There are 3 species of tegus that have been introduced. The Argentine black and white, the one I'm talking about, is the one that's most widespread. There's also a species called the gold tegu that looks a lot like this one. The normal person wouldn't really be able to tell them apart. But a long tail, if you're looking at them on their belly, there's rows of rectangular scales and forked tongue. And again, they're big. They're the largest of our tegids, and they're a large lizard. So any really big lizard you see in Florida should not be here. Be it a green iguana, a tegu, a Nile monitor, they're not supposed to be here. Speaking of Nile monitors, the upper image is a Nile monitor lizard, which you see has a compressed tail, long whip-like tail, and rows of coin-shaped, quarter-shaped spots over the back, not black and white, but usually yellowish or brown. And then you wouldn't want to confuse a tegu with a small American alligator, of which I guarantee you there's one out there. There's probably 20 of them here, and then there are alligators everywhere in Florida. But alligators, if you're able to see this closely, along their back, they have these bones called osteoderms, which is basically armor, these little bony plates in their back. And that gives them this rough appearance. So they're not at all smooth like tegus. And you can find alligators away from the water. You can also find tegus in and near water. So just because one of them's near water, you don't blow it off. Say, no, that's just an alligator. Or if it's away from water, assume it's not an alligator. Alligators move all over the place. All right, so the status of tegus in Florida, as best we can tell, there are 3 areas where there are established breeding populations. Those are in southern Florida and Miami-Dade County around Florida City. There's a species in Charlotte County that the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission is starting to study. That's over near Punta Gorda. And then a population in Hillsborough and Polk counties just due east of Tampa. And then there are a number of regions in Florida with numerous reports, but no evidence of likely establishment yet. And then other regions where there's a lot of single records here and there, and then even some isolated records in the Panhandle. So they could show up anywhere in Florida. They are not native here, as I mentioned, all right? They're native to Argentina, as the name would apply, and also some other countries in South America. As best we can tell, their initial release was at that population near Tampa by a local pet dealer. And the thought is he got an import of tegus, and there were some that were defective, maybe broken tails or injured. He didn't want to properly euthanize them, so he just turned them loose. Or sometimes pet dealers will actually release non-native species with the hope of them establishing a population from which the dealer can then draw on from the wild and sell. It's legal. It was legal until very recently to breed tegus, or it still is, but it's being phased out, and I'll end up telling you about some new regs. So that one's been there since the 2000s. Since sometime in the late 2000s, the population in South Florida was there. Also, look, escapes from a pet importer. And then the one in Charlotte County near Punta Gorda is a newer population, but it's believed there was escapes there from a local reptile breeder. So the invasion pathway is the pet trade. And as best I can tell, here's the range. On the left is a map that I drafted and my folks at IFAS drew up. And there's these established populations in dark, if you can see that, here, here, and here. And then the darker gray are areas where there are pretty frequent individual lizards seen. And there's also a thought that in St. Lucie County, there might be a population there. And then not that uncommon to have individual records throughout the rest of the peninsula. And then those dark circles in the left are the few records we know of in the Panhandle. So they can show up anywhere in Florida. Often when I'm addressing a group of people about invasive species, it's like, well, these are all in South Florida. We don't have to worry about them here. This is one we have to worry about and we should be worried about. And on the right is this map from a application called EdMaps where people report tegu lizards. Highly adaptable lizard. Does well in suburban neighborhoods, agricultural settings, but it also can occur in natural environments. The study my student did over in near Tampa, they were in scrub and pinelands. They're also in shrubby areas along the edge of the Everglades in South Florida. So they can inhabit a lot of different habitat types. So they're sort of a generalist, although they tend to like more open areas. And they like disturbed areas, roadsides, or power lines they will use to disperse and move around. They're primarily terrestrial, so they're on land, but they are good swimmers. Again, not the best climbers. They can climb a little way up in a shrub. They tend to be active during the day, so they're diurnal, and at night. And also another key thing that they do is they go dormant in the winter into burrows underground, and they will use burrows of gopher tortoises, armadillos. They might excavate their own. And one of the key things here is that these animals go through what's called brewmation. Basically, during the winter time of the year in their native range, they just go underground, they stop feeding, and since they're reptiles, they're not burning any calories, so they can just persist doing nothing for several months and wait out the cold. Even though it doesn't get that cold in South Florida, as you know, they still they have that behavior. Well, they go underground during the wintertime. They also do that in Central Florida at the study site over near Tampa. So they're kind of pre-adapted to deal with cold. And this has important implications on where we think they might have the ability to spread. But that brumation, being very much a generalist, these are things that help them invade and succeed. This is just some photographs on the left of a tegu going into a armadillo burrow. That's over in near the Tampa area in that Polk, Hillsborough County population. And down the right is one from a camera trap my student took with a tegu getting ready to go into a gopher tortoise burrow. And the gopher tortoises are one native tortoise that's an imperiled species that the state of Florida is very concerned about. So going underground at night and during the wintertime. Another thing in terms of being generalist, really broad diet. They eat just about anything, including plant material, invertebrates, and very disturbingly, vertebrate animals. And they'll also scavenge roadkill. In terms of plants, it's mainly fruits and berries that they like. In terms of the vertebrate animals, in addition to eating individuals, they also eat eggs of turtles, including potentially gopher tortoises, snake eggs, eggs from alligators. They might be predators on American crocodile eggs. So this is very, very disturbing behavior that they do. They're active foragers, so they move around a defined home range over time and forage and look for mates. They mature pretty young, 2 to 3 years, and they can live up to 20 years. So again, all these traits are just setting them up for being a good invader and being able to survive. And you see around 29 eggs once a year that a female would lay. So pretty fecund, as we would call them. Here's just an example of Tegu Diet. This is over by Tampa, my student, Tessie Offner. So on the left, that image is a vaccinium, or those are little native blueberries. In the middle image, those are lubber grasshoppers, which we presume are toxic based on their color. And then that picture on the right is the remains of a whole native mole that a tegu consumed. And then this along the bottom, this frequency of occurrence, or FO, of her roughly 100 tegus, half the stomachs contain plant material, 85% of the stomachs contain some sort of invertebrate matter. And this might be a whole bunch of grasshoppers or just one roach or something like that. And then very alarmingly, the highest that we've seen reported in the scientific literature, 80% of her animals had some evidence. It might have been hair, it might have been bones, but something to indicate they were eating vertebrate animals. And so that is a real concern of ours. And this is where the environmental impact part that I'm very concerned about starts, is that they're predators at a variety of trophic or different feeding levels. So they'll feed on animals, invertebrates that are herbivorous. They'll feed on things that are insectivorous. They'll feed on things that are carnivorous. So they're pretty high up, or they can be pretty high up on the food chain. And the threat to imperiled species is what the state is really concerned about. So my student found 5 of these tegu stomachs, individual tegus, contain the remains of small gopher tortoises, which is very disturbing because they like to go in tortoise burrows and they can occur in scrub. So potential negative impacts on tortoise populations. Also, this means if a population is established near the coast, they could go into shorebird colonies and eat eggs or young shorebirds. Burrowing owls, which is a native species of owl that we have here, they'd be terrible on them because they like to go in the burrows and then they would consume owls. They dig up reptile eggs, so potential predators of sea turtle eggs, American crocodiles, of imperiled snakes like the indigo. So that they knew of direct predation and very much, a threat to our native animals. And then it's possible, we don't have any evidence of yet, but they could be competing for food and space with our native species. And then because they like to consume fruits and berries, it is likely that they could be dispersing seeds of non-native invasive plants. This is just now a disturbing picture, at least from my standpoint. On the right is a tegu lizard outside of a gopher tortoise burrow, and on that left picture is the remains of a little hatchling gopher tortoise. So turtles, when they're small, are pretty soft. They're not all ossified and hardened yet. And this thing sticking out right there, that's the front claw of a baby gopher tortoise that that particular tegu had consumed over at her study site. In terms of other negative impacts that they have, we are concerned a little bit about their impact on agriculture. If you're familiar with Central Florida, you know the Plant City area, strawberry capital of the world, winter strawberry capital of the world. Because tegus are underground during most of strawberry season, probably not a problem, but we need to wait and see. Also, they might end up being a potential issue for folks who farm tomatoes or blueberries. Could they be a transfer of pathogens? Reptiles carry salmonella. And then other potential impacts on people. We use eggs to bait the trap, so there's potential for them to raid chicken coops, digging under structures, and then the cost of management, so cost to taxpayers. The state FWC has spent well over $2 million in the past 5 or 10 years trying to manage, monitor, and conduct research on tegus. So they have all these potential impacts. This was a study that was published that estimates that dark area in the southeast is inhabitable by tegus, very likely inhabitable by tegus. And on the right is a recent study, and you can see at the far right, that's Georgia. They are established in Georgia now. So they have the potential to expand well beyond Florida. A study in Alabama showed that they could overwinter there. All right. So their status until just very recently, still not federally regulated, but as of just a couple weeks ago, you didn't have to have a permit to keep one as a pet. You weren't allowed to release them, but you can't release anything non-native. They weren't protected, and then you had to have a license for breeding. But fortunately, at a commission meeting that just happened, it should be February 25th, right, rather than 5th, they are now considered prohibited. As of June 24th, there's going to be no commercial breeding and sale. And you also now will have to have a permit soon to have one as a pet or to have them in breeding. So they're going to phase out the breeding of these things. And if you currently have a pet tegu, you will be allowed to keep that one for the rest of its life. But you got to follow some stricter guidelines by the state. So what's the state doing? In South Florida, they removed thousands of these tegus, and that's partnerships between the Park Service, U.S. Geological Survey, Fish and Wildlife, University of Florida, Water Management District, and Florida Power and Light. In the Southwest, the one over in Charlotte County, FWC, the state is conducting some current work, and really not much going on with those ones in the Tampa area anymore. And at each of these sites, at one point or another, there's been trapping, monitoring, and research to learn more about them, because the more you know about something, the better you are able to manage it. So what can we do to prevent new invasions and not let this lizard spread? Well, if anyone has one as a pet, they need to make sure their cage is secure, all right? If you have a pet that you don't want, it's illegal and unethical to release it. The state has what's called a pet amnesty program, where you can turn over a pet. Maybe you're tired of keeping a tiger that you have in your backyard. Turn it over. The state asks no questions. Your tiger is taken and it's given to an adoptive family. Kid you not, the pet amnesty program. And then very importantly, and I'll leave you with, report sightings, all right? If you see this or anything else that's non-native, you can download an app. You can also go to a website, or if you're seeing a tegu in your backyard, you can call this exotic species hotline. And then if you're really industrious, you can actually, if you live out in the sticks and you have them, you can take matters into your own hands. I would encourage you to seek assistance from the state, but you could legally shoot a tegu if you're in an area where it's legal and safe to discharge a firearm. They're not protected except by anti-cruelty laws, but you could work with the state to get a trap. But just realize you have to have a plan in place to conduct humane euthanasia if you trap a tegu, because you can't just take it elsewhere and turn it loose. And then finally, if you're interested in more about tegus, there's some sites you could do a Google search. And then sometime pretty soon, in the next couple months, I'm going to have a big long document through the University of Florida on them. So that's the quick and dirty on tegus, hopefully with a little time left for questions. Thank you.
Again, if you're here in the building, we have Don Bugos, the handsome gentleman in the back with the microphone, to bring to you. And if you're online, please put your questions in the chat. We'll relay them to our wonderful speaker today. Don, who do we have first?
Good afternoon, fellow Rotarians. I'm Deborah Newell, and my question to you, this is very interesting because I lived in kind of an ecosystem that supported this type of thing, but it looks like that they're fairly proliferative. And what would be your best estimate based on the research and so forth that you all are doing as to how the population is growing across, like, per month, per 6 months, per year?
That is a great question. Often people say, well, how many are there? How many pythons are there in the Everglades? No one can answer that with any confidence. I could not tell you with any confidence how many tegus there are in Alachua County or in the state of Florida. We can usually tell you how many have been seen or how many have been removed, but really don't have good estimates of that, because to get those kind of data, it's a lot of work. You got to catch a bunch of animals, mark them, release them, and then recatch them again to estimate how many are out there, to do it, with scientific rigor. So no doubt in the state, thousands, maybe 10, we just don't know, But we can tell from those citizen science reports that they are continuing to show up farther and farther afield from what was the initial population. There were probably 3 independent introduction events. We know there were at least were 2 of them based on some genetic data. The animals in Hillsborough County were introduced separately, as escapes than the ones in South Florida. But how many there are, tough to say. I really just can't answer that.
We have a question online from Ryan Kremser. Where are we likely to encounter the tegus in Alachua County?
You could encounter them just about anywhere. Again, they like more, open grassy areas. Like if you live in a neighborhood that's rural and, or 5-acre lots or something, you could encounter them there, or anywhere someone might release one. Because that's what happens is people are releasing pets. They're 10 inches when they're little, and then they grow to be 4 feet long. And it's like, they live 20 years. So you maybe get one for your kid, or other pets are the same way. And then your child moves on and goes to college, and you're like, well, I'm tired of taking care of this tortoise or this big snake or this lizard. And you think you're doing the right thing, and people release them. So could be where any folks release them. So just about anywhere, really.
Jenny Van Hart has a question from online. What happens to these creatures once they're trapped as part of a roundup?
Yeah, so if they're trapped as part of the state or any of those agency protocols, they are humanely euthanized. Probably this would be via captive bolt, which is basically a 22 shot right to the head. So these folks are trained, they're permitted. Any of the research we've done on tegus, we go through the Institutional Animal Care and Use Committee. But yes, they are killed, but they're killed in a humane fashion. But that's what happens to them.
Thank you for your presentation. They're from Argentina, are they?
That's one of the places where they're native, yes.
What kind of damage have they done down there? And secondarily, do they have any natural predators?
Not too much, that I'm aware of in their native range, because the native species are adapted. I think they might be a little bit of an agricultural pest there, but not that much. Here, there could be predators when they're smaller, like a large wading bird could eat a small one. But once they get, 2, 3, 4 feet long, there's not much that's going to tangle with them. I suppose a large bird of prey possibly, but really it's people are, getting hit by a car, a car running over one. But that's one of the issues, once these animals get that big, they're not a whole lot of predators. We don't have, wolves, and we don't have many large predatory animals that running around Florida anymore. We could try, I hope so, but
I'm Kent Walker, and we saw a really strange looking lizard in our front yard back in May of this past year. And I wondered if I could just have you take a
I'll take a look. I can tell you from here, though, that is it looks like a broad-headed skink. So that's our biggest native lizard.
Is it? Okay,
So,
great. Thank you.
yes. Yeah. So that's native. That's a good one, right? I could see the bold colored head on that lizard in his photograph.
Hi, fellow Rotarians. Joe Anderson here. When I was growing up in Gainesville, this isn't about the Tegus, but we used to catch lizards all the time. And one of the species that we caught were the little chameleons. I think they're called the anoles now. Now all I ever see are these Cuban lizards.
Right.
I think they're all over the place. Is there anything that can be done about them, or have they pushed the anoles out?
Yeah. There's probably a dozen species of anoles, and it's the genus Anolis, Anolis. So we call them just Anolis or anoles. The one we have here is the green anole. People often call them chameleons because they can change color from brown to green, but chameleons are their own group of lizards that are Africa and Madagascar. So totally different taxonomically. But the brown anole, Cuban anole, whatever you want to call it, that was the first reptile that was introduced into Florida in the late 1800s, and it has since spread throughout the entire state and elsewhere. That's the one. If it wasn't rainy out, I could probably spy one on the sidewalk down there right now. And when you're walking across UF campus, or you see them in your yard, on a fence or on the ground, they do have negative impacts on the green anoles, but they can coexist. If you have a place where you have habitat that's got sort of a shrub layer and canopy, you might see both green anole and brown anoles. I live over in the northeast part of town. I have large oaks in my yard. I don't have a lot of shrub cover, so I don't see green anoles hardly ever, but I'm pretty confident they're there. They're just high up in the canopy. Green anoles, in the absence of brown anoles, will be from the ground all the way up, where brown anoles are more trunk and ground specialists, and so they live down there. But an adult brown anole will eat a baby green anole, and they've caused some of the decline there. But it's also that they're just in certain habitats they're very conspicuous. But fortunately, they can and do co-occur.
Question also here. I'll actually pose this question. If you come across one of the Tegas, are they aggressive, and what should someone do if they encounter one?
Well, I'd say if you're actually right in front of one, well, you want to document with a camera. Most everybody has a cell phone with them all the time. So document it, and if it's right in front of you, and you can remember this 1-888 I've got one. That's it. That's FWC state hotline that you can call and say, hey, I'm standing here. Now, if it's a big, large, giant python, that's not likely to run away very quick. You can do that, and maybe they could dispatch somebody from UF or somewhere. People, we have, networks, and they might call someone to come out. If you see the Tegu, try to document it with a photograph as best you can, and then get in touch with the state, the hotline, or upload it on that app. The I've Got One app you can take for your phone and get it documented, because that's where we learn more about, okay, we start seeing multiple records in this new area, and that can be enough evidence for the state then to send some biologists out and realize, okay, we've got a small little population, like a little fire smoldering out here. We need to try to get out there and snuff it out before it spreads. So reporting is very important, and I ask y'all to please do that.
Probably don't want to hang out near the python all day for them to come, or you can give them your leg to gnaw on. I guess we'll keep them busy for a while. My question was about the green versus brown anoles. I grew up in South Florida, and that story is exactly my story from childhood. The smaller ones, back then we thought they were American salamanders. We may have been calling them the wrong thing. I don't know if I'm talking about another species, but if you could clarify that. Went back to South Florida 10, 20 years later, they were almost gone, and I saw the bigger ones. And now you're telling me that those are the brown anoles maybe, or?
Now, when you're in South Florida, there is a whole community of non-native anoles down there, from what are called crown giants, Anolis equestris, to even little things called bark anoles, which look a lot like brown anoles and that are smaller than the brown anole, and they tend to be on the bark. And they also sort of, partition habitat farther out on limbs. So there's more than a dozen introduced anoles, and people are actually conducting scientific research on those anole communities down there. I'm not sure what you mean by the salamander, because salamanders are amphibians, and salamander diversity is really, really low. So I bet it's some sort of, it might have been, you might be talking about a gecko, which we only have one native species of gecko and a whole bunch of introduced ones, but I'm not sure what that would have been. But
Yeah, they were the only species prevalent, no larger ones around. They dominated the ecosystem, and then going back 10, 20 years later, gone. And in favor of the larger, about 50% larger.
Okay. And I've seen that similar situation with Cuban tree frogs. That's really my claim to fame, is if you know about Cuban tree frogs, it's probably through my outreach work at UF. And I grew up in Orlando, and when I was a kid, and we did not have Cuban tree frogs. If I go back there now, I'd be hard pressed in my old neighborhood to find a native tree frog anywhere. It's Cuban tree frogs, which get a lot larger, and predation. They eat the native tree frogs. We have places here where they're coexisting, but we do have Cuban tree frogs in Gainesville. We do not have, though, the cane or the quote bufo toad, which can be lethal to pets. We don't have those in Gainesville right now, as far as I can tell. If we do, I would certainly like to know about it, but that's a talk for another day for sure.
And last question, I'll sit down. Can you give everybody an update, maybe more pertinent to the update on the python taking over the ecosystem down in the Everglades, and what has been done versus the alligator, et cetera?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. A lot going on with python still. There's active research going on to try to build a better python trap. They're slowly spreading. There's, early detection, what is called early detection rapid response efforts when people would report a python. But fortunately with the pythons, when it's cold is likely going to be a limit to their distribution. They will seek refuge underground, but if it's too cold, they'll come to the surface to bask, to warm. And if it's too cold, that will cause them to, that can kill them. But, they're there. Are we ever going to get rid of them? Highly, highly, highly unlikely. We're in a control type management scenario. And again, trying to stop that new group of pythons from getting established elsewhere. But I think this tegu is as big of an issue, if not more, because we have good data to show it can spread in the Southeast US, in Georgia now. This is not just a Florida issue. So I'm partnering with other folks that do outreach in other parts of the Southeast. And this is something that you're going to see more and more on your radar. And when I get this fact sheet done, I'm going to marshal the outreach folks at UF and get this in the news, because we really got to let people know about this. So just as important as the pythons, but pythons sort of status quo, just again, scientific work, trying to figure out how many of them, there are, how to control them better. And then there are these hunters that they pay people, and it's been sensationalized too much on TV, I think. So, and that takes away from all these other bad invasive species we have, because we emphasize those pythons, as we should, but sometimes we forget about the other things.
One last question from Ryan Kremser online. How does the tegu taste?
That I don't know, since they are largely carnivorous. I would imagine gamey. I have tasted Nile Monitor, and I don't recommend it. I'd stick with green iguana. On the other hand, supposedly is really good.
I hear wild game feast just popping in people's head.
Yeah, we serve python at ours.
I'm going to save you from that question. Here, 1 second. Thank you so much. This year's Rotary theme is Rotary opens opportunities. Excuse me. And so thank you for the opportunity today to share. Here's a commemorative coin to remember today, and we appreciate your presentation very much. Thank you. All right, so we did think we were going to hear about frogs, and so you're going to get 2 quotes, because I really like one of the frog quotes. If a frog becomes a king, he will make the whole kingdom muddy. I can't read the name, but it was a good quote. All right, I am the lizard king. I can do anything. Jim Morrison. All right, fellow Rotarians, have a great week. See you soon.